I'm your host, Jason Tartick, and welcome to Trading Secrets. We talk all things money on this podcast, and we're teaching all the stuff we just weren't taught in the classroom. Nothing supports this show more than liking, commenting, and of course, subscribing. Welcome back to another episode of Trading Secrets. Today, we are joined by a licensed mental health counselor, entrepreneur, and content creator known by the name That Foodie Therapist, Ashley Gersh. After completing her BS in psychology and master's in clinical mental health counseling, Ashley decided to flex her entrepreneurial spirit and start her own practice offering individual and group counseling services, helping navigate the stages of grief triggered by loss of loved ones, an ambiguous loss such as breakups, divorce, and estrangement from family. From there, she added the title content creator to her resume by sharing bite-sized tips to help heal after toxic relationships through food on her social media accounts. We are going to dive into the career of a licensed mental health counselor, the reasons why she wanted to start her own practice, and how the combination of her mental health background and content creation skills led her to the success as That Foodie Therapist. Ashley, thank you so much for being on Trading Secrets.
Thank you so much, Jason, for having me here. I'm so excited.
There's a lot there. There's a lot that you've done, from entrepreneurial work to your specific niche of breakups, divorce, and estrangement from family. I feel like that is a lot of action there, and definitely something that's been connected to my life over the last couple years. So, let's just talk about this. I said it a couple months ago. Breakups suck. They do. You're living in it every single day. When you're dealing with people, regardless of who broke up with who or what happened, why is it that breakups are so brutal? What is it about breakups that just suck? What's like the psychology behind it?
I think it's something that's also so relatable. Like you just said, you've experienced it. I've been both the client and the healer, right? It's something that's worldwide. We experience grief and loss, not just when we lose a loved one, but when there is ambiguous loss in our lives, which is grieving someone who is still alive, right? So we experience ambiguous loss in breakups, divorce, estrangement from family, when we no longer speak to people who are still living but aren't necessarily in our lives.
Right.
And there's this loss of an imagined future that you expected to have with somebody.
Right.
And there's a lot of layers with grief. You could be grieving the actual, person, the person who you wanted to be with, right? But maybe it's unrequited love. Or maybe it's you had imagined being partnered at a certain age and starting a family at a certain age. So you're grieving the life you had imagined you would have with this person. Either way, right? Social rejection, abandonment, loss. Emotional pain is felt in our brains, actually, the same way that we experience physical pain.
No way.
Yes.
I think it feels like worse, honestly. I feel like sometimes I'd rather deal with like the physical pain than the mental pain of grieving loss.
Sure. There was a study done, actually. So people who had gone through a breakup, they didn't want the breakup. They used an fMRI to look at their brains, and they were trying to see if the same parts of the brain lit up when the people who had been broken up with were looking at a picture of their ex-partner. And what the study found from the imaging was that the same parts of the brain lit up just as if they had experienced physical pain.
Okay, so when in this study, someone that was broken up with sees a picture of their ex, and their brain is lighting up in pain from seeing the ex the same way that physical pain would light up in your brain.
Exactly.
Interesting. So it's someone that's a counselor, when you're dealing with these people that are experiencing that pain at that level, because, again, this is a business podcast too. So what I've noticed is how some people I know that go through breakups, they actually thrive in their professional life. They thrive because it's a distraction. They can channel their energy. They've learned to cope maybe in healthier ways because they're used to trauma. Me personally, when I'm dealing with the breakup, I'm paralyzed. I can't think about anything other than the person. I don't want to work. I have no creative energy. I'm just I'm just like a puddle. I just like suck. And it takes time, and you go through the grieving process, which we'll talk about. Let's start with this. When you're seeing people experience this type of pain that even feels like physical pain, how are you helping them through so they can still function in all areas of their life? Not only heal personally, but still function in business, still show up as a mother or father or brother or partner or whatever it is that they're going through. What advice do you give them?
That's such a great question. A lot of people want the pain to go away, right?
Yeah, oh, of course.
Right? Even you just said, you're like, I throw myself into work. People will distract themselves. And there are healthy distractions and there are unhealthy distractions. Yeah.
What would you define healthy versus unhealthy?
Well, is it harming you, right? Are you drinking and engaging in like maladaptive coping skills, right?
Yeah.
So adaptive coping skills would be things that are healthy for you, but coping skills that are unhealthy for you, right? Are you engaging in unprotected sex? Are you engaging in drinking and doing this to the point where it's unsafe for you?
Okay. Sometimes I think I numb through work. I will work more because it's a numbing mechanism of avoidance of feelings. I don't like the feeling of feeling sad. That doesn't seem healthy though.
Well, one, that's great awareness. You're like, I know I do this and it's not working for me.
Right.
Actually, is it working for you?
I mean, it's working. I feel like I'm in a therapy session. Like work, I guess, is going well, but then I think what happens is I spin the wheels to distract myself from the pain I'm feeling, which isn't great.
What does your therapist tell you?
My therapist tells me my biggest issue is sitting in feelings, especially with this last breakup and my other one too. The idea of just like sitting in the feeling, getting very comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Exactly. So, and that's really, really common. The majority of people, just attachment in society is avoidant. Most people are avoidant. However, you're gonna live a life based on the amount that your nervous system is willing to tolerate. So it's not about trying to make the pain and sadness go away, because if you weren't experiencing grief, we would have to strip you of your love. All the love that you can feel in life, that would have to be gone in order for you not to feel any pain. And we would just be AI robots walking around. Yeah. Right? So life is about increasing your tolerance and your ability to sit with the discomfort. So imagine you're in this very, very tiny coat closet, and the coats in this closet are grief and pain and the trauma that you've experienced. And you open this tiny closet and you just bump into everything and it's overwhelming, so you slam the door shut. Yeah. Life is about building that closet so that it's a bigger closet. So when you step into it, you're not just bumping into everything every time you open it. You have a tolerance. You can walk in and out and still get the clothes that you need from that closet.
That's a good analogy. It's a really good one. I do find that it sucks. It really sucks. But the steps forward, once you have grieved properly, you feel a little bit like lighter. I feel like I'm learning more. I feel like hitting rock bottom allows me to have depths I never had before. And as much as it sucks, I would rather live a life of like feeling that pain, knowing that pain, and developing as a human to impact not only myself, but others, because I went through that pain. And I feel like with breakups, it's like you gotta go through it. You gotta feel it. You have to not distract yourself with especially unhealthy behaviors like jumping into another relationship or, drinking too much or partying too much or whatever it might be, and just understand what it is, what you feel, how you're feeling it, and why it makes you feel that way. One thing my therapist told me that was interesting, and it connects to the business side of this podcast too, is I was, especially right after the breakup, I told you this, I couldn't think of anything else. I couldn't. And she asked me a question that was interesting. She goes, when are you feeling like you're loneliest or you're saddest or you're having these racing thoughts? And instantly I was like, morning and night. It's always morning and night. And she told me about this clock we have. And she talked a little bit about the fact that, if you look at your routine and you look at your history of dating, when are you spending the most time with that person? And I'm like, always morning and night, because my whole life I've always been busy during the day. And so it's interesting that we have these clocks that have been working for as many years we've been around, and the absence of something that was always there, especially at a certain time of the day, can even have a big impact on us, which is interesting.
Absolutely. As humans, we are hardwired for safety, right? So if at those points of the day you were typically talking to your girlfriend, right, and that is stripped from you,
Yeah.
think about like losing a loved one, right? That is, they're gone. You would normally call them on the phone or tell them something exciting, just like you would a girlfriend. You'd call them on the phone or you'd tell them something exciting happened, and that is gone, right? So your sense of safety has been stripped. Your need for clarity, predictability, stability, these are all things that we need to feel safe. And so that is just completely ripped from you at the times when you would typically have that clarity and safety from someone.
Yeah.
So it's like abandonment, right? That person that you would go to,
Right.
who would be there for you at the times that you would typically talk to them, spend time with them, be with them, is now gone. So that sense of safety is gone.
Yeah.
And now you feel lost or confused or abandoned, right? It's
Yeah.
a feeling of loneliness that people deal with when you're grieving. And so in breakups or divorce or even estrangement from family, right?
Yeah.
If you know that the connection is no longer good for you or your needs weren't being met, right? It was no longer compatible for whatever reason. It's then working on being able to trust yourself that you can still meet those needs even if someone else can't. So even in that loneliness, it's expanding your ability to sit with that grief, letting yourself know, like, I don't need to feel okay right now. Maybe I actually just need to let myself feel, because having compassion for yourself is saying, there's nothing wrong with me for feeling sad. There's nothing wrong with me for feeling lonely. Like, this is so normal. We all want that safety and love.
Yeah. Is that the same if you feel like your needs aren't being met and you had to walk away from it? These are the things you should think. Is it the same if it's the opposite? It's that you thought your needs were being met, you were into it, you were broken up with. Is it the same? Does that hold true?
Well, sure. You can't be in a relationship with somebody who doesn't want to be there.
Yeah. That's like the old adage, eh?
So
Yeah.
your needs weren't being met because
That's a good point.
they weren't the ones who could meet them.
True. And I feel like life's about like decisions and choices. And if you're not chosen, then you have to understand that.
And especially if you're not chosen, right?
Right.
So that's where a lot of people their worthiness gets stuck, right? So people who are ghosted, people who get broken up with, some people are trying to soothe themselves by chasing after that person, right? But what's happening there is that most of the time people will feel like their worth is getting stuck when they're not getting that validation from the person that they're seeking it from.
Okay. There's an attachment style you might have to someone, right? Or attachment in some form. Tell me where I'm off here.
Okay.
And that person is then gone from your life. And what I'll notice is even work and stuff, like my confidence, like especially when it just happens, your confidence goes. But I feel like when you have an attachment to someone and that attachment's gone, I feel like losing confidence is a very normal thing to go through.
Very normal. And though, I'm going to tie this into money, right? So say we have a $100 bill. Okay. Say someone takes that $100 bill, they throw it on the ground, they step on it, they crumple it up. Yep. Its value remains the same. But think about that happening to a person, right? They get unseen or they get mistreated, or there's unfairness. It's not going to feel good, but their value still remains the same, even if that other person couldn't see it.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. So you just got to take that $100 bill, clean it off, and get back on your feet.
Right. Even if someone decides not to pursue you, right? Or even if they do decide to pursue you, it doesn't define your sense of worthiness.
Okay. Interesting. All right. What tips do you give someone if like the other person, you're going through a breakup and the other person is on your mind a lot? Like you're just thinking about them a lot, or you see something and it reminds you of them. Like what are some things to do in those? So even if you're at a work meeting and someone says something like them and you're like, oh my God, shit. Like what are you supposed, what was like the healthy way to deal with that? Well, and what is that, by the way? Is there a name for that? Like when you're thinking about something over and over again?
So ruminating. So
ruminating.
A lot of times people will be like ruminating, right? Like there's a loss. You don't have a sense of clarity or safety, right? There's ambiguity. There's maybe a lack of closure, or you're grieving, right? Maybe you're in denial that the relationship ended, and so you're constantly thinking about it. Or if you're in the bargaining stage of grief, that could be overthinking in the sense of, saying to yourself, well, if I had just gone to that party, maybe we would have still been together. Or if we had one more conversation, maybe things would be different.
Yeah.
Right? And so what's happening there is it's another way to avoid sitting in the pain, right?
Bargaining is.
Bargaining and denial. They're both ways to avoid
The pain of what the reality is.
Exactly.
When you're going through the grieving process, there are stages, right? And so isn't the first stage is denial, right?
So the stages are a reflection of how you're feeling, and how you're feeling can change in any given moment of time.
Right.
So denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. You might just even sitting here talking about like your past relationships, you might like be shifting from like, bargaining to acceptance to depression, right? Just thinking of different scenarios that make you feel a type of way about what happened.
Yeah, like you're bouncing through the stages.
Exactly.
Interesting. There's also, my understanding, something called complicated grief. So I think about the dog situation. I no longer have the dogs, lost dogs, have gone to therapy immensely and intensely for it. And I've been told it's considered complicated grief, where you're grieving something. I guess it's kind of like a relationship too. You're grieving something that actually is still alive.
That's ambiguous loss.
That's what ambiguous loss is.
Yes.
Okay. And anyone out there that's listening to this that is dealing with any kind of ambiguous loss or complicated grief, what type of advice do you have for them?
The same thing, right? Let yourself feel it. Build out that coat closet so that it's bigger, so that you can tolerate the pain, because it's not about making the pain go away. My business mentor, Wyndon Rowe, she talks about love and money in these two ways. We have two factors in life that we need in order to live a healthy and sustained life. And these two factors exist before we're born, when we're born, and after we die. And that's love and money.
Really? Interesting.
We need love and money in order to live a healthy life on this planet.
This is a great tie into the podcast. I obviously wrote a book called Talk Money to Me, the idea of financial transparency. When you're working with divorces or estrangement from family or relationship struggles, I have to imagine, obviously love is an issue, but how does money tie into things that you've seen? And what advice do you have for people from a mental health counselor on just managing that very complicated situation? I mean, all the stats are there. 50% of couples don't talk about it. Those that do talk about it, it creates material tension in the relationship. Divorce rate is high because of money issues. There's money infidelity, cheating and lying and stealing through money. There's money issues with families that are connected to individuals. I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, what type of advice do you have in that scenario?
It's very much like how you would talk to someone about if you're dating, right? So think about your attachment style, right? Is it secure, anxious, avoidant, disorganized?
Wait, real quick. What is attachment style exactly?
So the attachment theory itself is based off, by the time you're 18 months old, you have a certain attachment to your caregivers. So that could be like a secure attachment. You're sad when they leave. You're happy when they return. Anxious. You're really anxious when they leave, and it's hard to soothe yourself when they come back. Avoidant is just kind of like, you don't even care if they're there or gone. And disorganized is that frantic push and pull, which is what we find in a lot of like today's dating society and dating culture.
Yeah.
Is this disorganized, like, give me boyfriend, girlfriend commitment without actually being my boyfriend or girlfriend.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, I don't know why my brain immediately went to dogs. Like, I feel like when dogs lose attachment, or let's just say their mom or dad goes to work, I feel like every dog kind of handles that different. Some are like, I'm going to sit in the crate and pout. Some are, I'm going to bite everything and eat everything, and the magazines are going to ripped up. Some just go crazy. Some pee everywhere. So it's like kind of crazy. It's interesting to see, like, as humans, we all have attachment styles to caregivers. So mom, dad, or significant other. And then how we react when those attachments are threatened is what is our attachment style.
Yes, but your attachment to mom, dad, or caregiver, right, influences the choices that you make with your partners. You know, like think about the family that you grew up in, and what you learned was, did chaos equal closeness? Is that the type of partner that you're also ending up with? And the same thing goes for money, right? So like, do you have a safe relationship to money? Is there predictability and clarity and safety? Or do you find that when you're dating that money is coming up in the conversation a lot because it's something that you don't already have a safe relationship with?
Interesting. So what are some of the biggest issues you see with money and love and people that you've worked with or studying that you've done? Like what are some of the things, maybe some of the challenges that arise, or maybe where couples miss the most when it comes to money and love? What does that look like?
I think it looks a lot like people tying their sense of self-worth in regards to the money that they make or don't make,
Okay.
and that impacting the relationship dynamic.
Yeah.
So some people, if you have money becoming a power hierarchy between people,
Yeah.
say one partner who makes less than the other is like, well, I'm doing all the invisible labor, which would be maybe like taking care of the kids or doing the laundry or cooking and cleaning and taking care of all the household chores. And they're minimizing their milestones or celebrations, and maybe they're also working. They're minimizing the good things happening, and they're also maybe not talking about their struggles because they're like, oh, it's not as important as my partner's who's making more money than I am.
Interesting. So what a lot of relationships are doing are they're allowing money to create a value proposition in the relationship, and then they believe that they're leveraging money as a tool for worth, right? So someone makes the money, therefore they feel as though they have like leverage and power to use it in a toxic way.
Which creates a power imbalance, whether it's consciously or unconsciously.
Yeah.
And if you just look at work as work, then you deconstruct and you get rid of the power hierarchy.
Right. Exactly.
I want to go back to something you said that I
Okay.
think is really important.
Yeah.
That money also can come into play when looking for a partner, because if you think about what your attachment was to money, right?
Yeah.
Like, did you have a relationship to money always through your parents? Are you then looking for a partner who then is also managing your money or making money decisions for you, right?
Interesting.
Are you looking for your relationship to money to still be through a third party, right?
Okay. So it's like analyzing what is your relationship with money.
Right.
Huh.
Right. The way that your family, right, managed money, talked about money, or maybe didn't talk about money is going to impact your relationship with your partner and how you approach them or how you date or how you find someone that's compatible, right? And what's familiar to us isn't always what's healthiest for us.
Right.
Remember about the study with the brain,
Yeah.
people who felt pain. Our brains are always trying to protect us from pain. So if it's saying, okay, well, I associate, money with chaos, right? Or it's always this ambiguous thing to me, someone who manages the finances in the relationship and you have no control over it, right?
Yeah.
Or no say, or it's just this ambiguous thing, that might actually feel safe, but it's just maybe another way to avoid your relationship with money.
Interesting.
That familiarity, right, feels safe, but sometimes what feels uncomfortable isn't always bad for us. It's just something we're not familiar with. So finding a partner where, they're not managing your money might feel unsafe at first because you didn't grow up like that. But
Right.
that doesn't mean it's unhealthy.
Interesting. Okay. So it's a lot of analyzing what the relationship is to money or love and seeing how we're reacting, and then based on our reaction kind of analyzing the why there and understanding what is the attachment with it from like day one to now. What did you see
Yes.
from your parents? How did it impact you, and what does it mean to you today?
Especially when it comes to emotional safety, right? What you need for a loving, healthy relationship. You can kind of look back and say, okay, well, growing up, did I learn that having money came at the cost of my emotional safety, right?
Yeah.
So are you then with this person or dating because they provide the money, but you're actually not having a need met, which is emotional safety?
Right.
That could be something that people see too.
Okay, interesting. Let's talk a little bit about this idea of, I'm looking at my hands, I got calluses on them, right? You work out, you hit the weights, and then you build calluses. And I think about relationships and a lot of this topic, and you go through breakup, and then you get your heart broken. You go through a breakup, you get your heart broken. What is your take as a mental health counselor on the idea of just not becoming callous and still putting yourself out there when maybe you've been given so many reasons to rethink that?
Oh, yeah. Vulnerability is such a courageous thing. Anyone who's dating should be proud of themselves for putting themselves out there after any type of heartbreak.
Interesting.
It's a lot of compassion that you need to have for yourself.
Right.
Right? Or for anyone in the dating pool.
Yeah.
Because you are continuously, over and over again, going to experience these losses.
Right.
And it's normal to think about your future with someone, because how else do you build a life with them? You want to kind of think about what your life could be like together.
Yeah, totally.
And so you might do that, right? But in order to keep doing that, right, and not get bitter, it comes also back to trusting yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're really anxious in dating, you might not be enjoying yourself because you're ruminating, you're overthinking.
Right.
You're not present on the date. And that comes back to the nervous system, right? Like increasing your capacity to feel maybe rejected. No one is exempt from feeling hurt when putting themselves out there. You expose yourself to the possibility of failure or heartbreak or rejection.
Right.
So it's just kind of checking in on those realistic expectations that you're going to go through a few thoughtful tries in order to find something that you're like a relationship that meets your needs and someone that you're compatible with.
I feel like the idea of trusting people's words, to me, I don't know if it exists anymore in relationships, because I've been told so much and then the opposite happens. And I'm like, now in my brain, I'm just like, actions will speak, not words.
Yes.
I mean, what's your take on that?
100%.
Okay.
If there are words there, actions always have to follow up.
Yeah.
Because you can't have commitment from somebody without that consistency.
Sure.
Then
Yeah.
it's that you have that disorganized, anxious feeling, right? Because it's this push and pull, it's confusing. And when we have that confusion, we don't have the safety and stability and predictability we need for emotional safety.
Makes sense. All right. When you're working with a lot of these people that are going through divorce and breakups, what do you think, like if you had to write a book, what do you think are some of the biggest reasons why relationships end?
I think it's people not working on their own insecurities and family childhood wounds that they bring to the table in that relationship. It's a lack of awareness and willing to work on it.
Okay. That's a big one.
That's my food for thought.
That is your food for thought, the therapist foodie.
And this also, if we think about jobs, right? Job loss in the job market, a lot of the same things that we're talking about can be applied to anybody experiencing a job loss.
It's true, because you're grieving.
Exactly. And you have even more of a lost sense of safety. If you think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, money gives you a sense of safety because you need money to survive.
What is Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is the idea that like your basic needs are met first, right?
Okay.
Like shelter, food, water. You can't have those things without money.
Interesting.
So if you lose a job, right, your sense of income, especially if you're not saving, drops. So remember, we need safety otherwise we're just in survival mode.
Right. Okay. Interesting. That makes perfect sense. And I remember my dad lost his job 30 plus years with the company and was let go. And I remember him just being like, he was he was really going through it. And I was like, oh, it's a job. Like, it's all good. He's like, no, it's more than that. And it's interesting to see whether it's love, whether it's work, whether it's money, this grieving process is pretty consistent with that. Like, that's a fascinating thing. One thing I want to talk about is, I think this, especially to my listeners when it comes to work, maybe it's in relationships, maybe it's presentation, maybe it's year end here because annual reviews. The idea of protesting for yourself. Something I struggle with, especially like with this whole public stuff, like dealing with breakups in the public light. I just kind of keep my mouth shut and put my head down. But like, what is your take from a mental health counselor of the idea of protesting for yourself? When do you know when? When do you know how? Whether it's at work or it's in a relationship, what are the healthy ways to do it? Just the concept of speaking up for yourself. What's your take on it?
Interesting question. I think a lot of people have to navigate that in their workplace when there is probably a lot of injustices, but also in relationships when you want to set, healthy boundaries for yourself for what makes you feel safe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think speaking up for yourself, it really depends on the context, right? Like, are you wanting to speak up for yourself because you just got broken up with and you're feeling like you're actually trying to like regulate yourself by having them be a witness to your pain and validating that? Or are you speaking up for yourself because you are trying to you're trying to teach someone what it is that you need in order to feel safe in the environment that you're in with them?
Okay. So it's identifying what is it that you're protesting for and the why, and then if it makes sense or not based on that.
Yeah.
And I always find that like when it comes to anything like that, a work fight or a personal fight or just any type of conflict, I always feel like let the dust settle first. Like just like take a breather, take a walk, take 5 minutes, go ground yourself, whatever you got to do, let the dust settle. And then once the dust is settled, then go in and attack it with logic as opposed to emotion. I feel like that's like a healthy thing to do, right?
100%. You're increasing, you're expanding the coat closet, right?
Right.
Because by doing that, you're self-regulating.
Yeah.
And then you're able to speak for the part of you that's maybe angry or sad or misunderstood rather than from that part of you. And that might come out as like yelling when you actually want to be heard, and yelling isn't the best way to be heard.
So expanding the coat closet for people back home is the idea of creating space in what feels like chaos to you, right?
Yes.
Right. So you're in this small, and it's finding ways to like, I don't know, I'm imagining like you're in a jail cell and like you're tied in there, and then it's like, okay, you gotta like break the walls down a little bit. You gotta like create more space in there. But like that's what you're saying with the closet. Create more space so that you can live in a state of understanding your traumas, because understanding them will allow you to grow.
Understanding, but more so the ability to regulate yourself and tolerate them, because life isn't about making the pain and trauma and sadness and loneliness go away. It's all part of being human, right? These are normal human emotions you're experiencing because of something that happened to you. Okay. Right?
Yeah.
So it's about increasing your tolerance of those experiences rather than trying to make them completely disappear. And as you do those home renovations, right?
Yeah.
You expand the coat closet by having more tools in your toolbox to tolerate that. So when those things happen, it shakes up your sense of safety, because your sense of predictability and stability, like when your dad lost his job or when there's a loss, right, of any kind, your sense of safety, what you expect to happen, is now gone.
Okay. Interesting.
So you have to then have the tools to cope with that. And that comes from knowing that you can meet your needs and that you trust yourself to get those needs met.
I love it. I think that's great advice for anyone, whether it has to do with dealing with a relationship, a breakup, work, all the things. Take that closet, make it bigger, create that space. I think that's really important. What would you say? Let's kind of like finish this breakup talk with number one mistake. What do you think the biggest mistake you see people make in relationships? Biggest mistake?
Probably a lack of self-regulation.
Okay.
And
that makes sense,
because their insecurities are going to come up, and if they don't know how to regulate themselves, right, to then have a conversation with their partner, maybe a compassionate conversation.
Okay.
Then it's going to lead to a lot more misunderstandings than they probably intend to.
Makes sense. All right. How about those that are single out there that are dating right now? What's a good question you would ask someone that you're like going on a date with to like see if there's compatibility, or maybe understand like some of the things that you could proactively get ahead of? What's a good question out there?
I think it's more asking themselves, right? If you know what kind of partner you're looking for, and you know what your relationship values are, right? Which could be things like playfulness, loyalty, honesty, responsibility, like lots of different things. If you know what those things are you being that person first? Are you showing yourself the same love and validation and compassion and empathy to yourself that you want your partner to also give to you?
That makes sense. Okay. That's a good answer. All right. Let's talk trading secrets. Talk a little money here. So when I go therapy, it's $150 for 60 minutes. $225 for 90 minutes. I've talked to some friends in LA and New York. I tell them those numbers and they're like, that's unbelievable. I tell some of those people back home in Buffalo, they're like, you're out of your damn mind. How are you spending that much? You need to go to therapy for how much you're spending on therapy. What's your take on the business side of therapy? Like if someone is considering working with a therapist, what are some questions they should ask? What should they expect to pay? Just the overall health of the business. Like give us some insight on the business of counseling, therapy, psychology. What do you got?
The business of therapy is so complicated because of healthcare.
Okay.
So we have a lot of people who want to use insurances, right? So that it's a cheaper copay for them, which totally makes sense.
Of course.
But because of that strategy and that dynamic, the healthcare system has put the responsibility of the provider, right, the therapist, to then be totally accessible to all these people without paying them the appropriate pay that they need to survive.
Okay, because every therapist I've ever worked with, ever, is private pay. And so the reason that they're private pay is because the health insurance co-pays does not suffice for what they would have to do to live.
Exactly.
Interesting. So, I mean, like, have you ever seen, like, I don't think I've ever come across therapists that's not private pay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know plenty of both.
Okay.
But the people, it's more common that the people who are taking insurance are probably more burnt out because they're having to see a higher amount of people in their caseload in order to make the same amount of money that a self-pay private practice clinician is seeing.
Interesting.
Right? So if you think about, again, like getting your needs met, like essentially the healthcare system is like dictating how much money you are getting. And they're telling you like, well, if you need this to survive, you're going to have to see this many clients. But that's not right. No one should be telling you how much money you need in order to survive.
Right. Interesting.
Right?
What's the solution there? Like,
well,
what do you do?
I mean, I don't know. That's a really, really big question.
Yeah.
That's like a systemic issue. But if you think about it, right, like a healthy relationship consists of self-care and boundaries. So if you are just giving, it's normal to also want to receive. So as the therapist, there's a lot of stigma around like, oh, I'm not paying my therapist that much money.
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to, I don't want to pay, this amount in order to receive therapy.
Yeah.
Right? But in order to have that healthy dynamic, even between the therapist and the client, you're going to want to see a therapist who's not like hyper vigilant, just trying to survive.
Right. So not burnt out themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So actually paying them what they need in order to survive makes sense for the model, the business model for a therapist to charge what they need in order to provide you the best care possible.
Fascinating. Oh, it comes down to cost and quality, like everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I tell you $150 for 60 minutes, what's your initial reaction?
Like average.
Okay,
it
so
really,
in line.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Totally. It really depends on like
$1.50 a minute.
It's like a little bit deeper than that. Every therapist they live in a different area where they might need a different amount of money to survive.
Sure, cost of living, yeah.
Exactly, cost of living. They also might have different specialties, so they might be needing different trainings and stuff, right? So the people who have judgments on that are making a really generalized assumption.
That's a good point.
And every therapist is different. Maybe one therapist lives alone or has roommates.
Supply demand too. Like
exactly.
I know it took me forever to get into this, and I love her. I mean, for me, it is the easiest money I've ever spent in my life. Like, because I've never made a better investment in myself than therapy. I don't even blink. I get excited to pay her. I don't even think twice.
We love that.
So, and I mean that. That's truly it. I could keep going in a million different directions. It's interesting to talk about the mental health side of things as it connects to work, grieving, loss, relationships. I always looked at my life like a professional silo, a financial silo, and a personal silo. And I quickly learned there is no such thing. All of those coexist as one. Like, they're all bleed, and this just justifies all that.
Especially with both of us being business owners and entrepreneurs, are we, and our relationship to money, are we creating a business that can sustain our lives, or is it an unhealthy power imbalance dynamic that we have with money, that we're working and not getting money to sustain our lives?
Exactly. Which then connects to what we're doing and how we're showing up in relationships and in life and in work and all the things. They all tie together.
Exactly, right.
All tie together. Well, I could talk to you for another hour about all your entrepreneurial activity. We might have to have a part 2 at some point. But for right now, Ashley, we got to get your trading secrets. So something very unique to your experience. Can't learn from a professor. Can't learn on a TikTok tutorial. Maybe it's your TikTok tutorial. They can. But a trading secret from you, Ashley. What can you leave us with?
The first thing is finding the right therapist is like dating.
Okay.
Sometimes it'll take a few thoughtful tries to maybe talk to different therapists, see which one you're compatible with, which one's a good fit, which one you feel like is relatable or understands you, right? Because that brings safety. And the second one is, once you find that therapist, don't fall trap to the flight to health. That means the idea that you think you're fully healed after maybe 1 to 3 sessions because you got a lot of insight or tools, and then you think everything is so much better. Give yourself time and know
it takes years.
Yes.
Years.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so many people think that a couple sessions, will do it. But it's all of the things that even we just talked about. It takes a lot of time to peel back the layers, to unlearn the things that you learned when you were earlier that have gotten you to where you're at today. And if you want to be dating someone differently or having different financial success in your life, right? Really unpack those layers to understand how you got there, so you can start learning different ways to make decisions for yourself that get you to where you want to go.
It makes perfect sense. I remember when I first started therapy, I went for 3 months, thought I had it all figured out. I went cold for about a year, and everything unraveled. Like everything unraveled.
Yeah.
And I called her back. I'm like, her name's Jiffy. Jiffy, I need you, and I need you now. And from that point on, that was probably 2021, I go at a minimum once a month. And then when I'm dealing with some serious stuff, which has been a lot the last couple of years, usually like every couple of weeks. But
can you give from experience, like how has therapy helped you process your breakup? Or breakups?
In every single way possible. Like I know that like emotions and pain are hard for me. I don't like to feel sad. I don't like to feel lonely. And so what I'll do is I'll numb it, and I'll usually numb it in productive ways. I'll numb it through working out. I'll numb it through work, but that just doesn't heal in any way. I also have learned a lot about the fact that I put up blinders. I live in denial of the reality. There will be red flags that happen, or there will be things that are going on in a relationship. And I'll always, like an eternal optimist, always try and find the good of it. And if I see the bad, I'll like brush it under the rug, because part of me is like a little bit of a hopeless romantic. And then what happens is those things that were brushed under the rug, those things that like you just kind of ignored, they come to fruition. And then they come to fruition in a hard way, and when you least expect it. So a lot of it's been sit in the feelings, feel the shit out of your feelings, like feel them, let it go. You got to name it. You got to drain it. There's no way to heal otherwise. And moving forward, don't put up blinders to things that are very, very real. And that's something, unfortunately, I've done. And I've repeated those behaviors. And yeah, I've learned a lot, and I got to keep learning. But the one thing I won't do is I'm going to keep stepping it. Like I know it's really tough when you're in the private and public light. And in both cases, being in the public light, you're going to get a lot of noise. And there's been a lot of noise out there, especially in the last breakup. And there's not one, I haven't seen one person that's guessed it right of all the thousands of things I've seen. And I also recognize I get a little triggered by being mislabeled, but
it's normal. No one likes to be misunderstood.
Yeah. But then just kind of like sitting with that, recognizing what it is. And I think the idea of grieving, healing, and understanding things both privately and publicly, which are totally different, and protecting your peace and making sure that the things that don't, not everyone needs to know everything, And so I think I struggle with the protesting thing too, but Right. I've learned a lot, Ashley, and I'm still learning. Next week, I got a 90-minute session. So I'm healing. I'm growing. We are getting there. And hopefully anyone that listens to this podcast is feeling a little bit just insightful and okay. Like it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to understand how personal things impact your professional things. And the best thing to do is be self-aware, analyze it, and then work with professionals to help you grow. So Ashley, where can everyone find everything you have going on? Your social media, your entrepreneurial activities, give everyone the plug, where they can go with questions, thoughts, or anything.
Yes. So they can go to my website if they're seeking help for therapy. And if they're a Florida resident, they can go to www.actionashley.com, where I help people take action on their healing journey.
Cool.
And they can also find me on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram at That Foodie Therapist, where I give people food for thought on different mental health topics, specifically relationships, and lots of bite-sized tips with good food.
Bite-sized tips with good food. We're actually going to record a couple of those today, so definitely go check out Ashley, see what she has to say, and all the help. It's pretty cool when you can mix in food and therapy. That is a power combo right there. Mm-hmm. Ashley, thank you so much for being on this episode of Trading Secrets.
Thank you so much for having me.